Okay, good evening. This is the information session for the affordable units at Hanover Mystic in Medford. My name is David Cashman. I'm with SEB Housing, and if you've applied already or if you've started looking into the process, you've probably seen our name, or if you've applied, you've interacted with us. We are the off-site affordable housing consultant who's been hired by the development team to assist them in doing the required marketing, running a lottery, and evaluating applicants for program eligibility. But we're not the leasing office, and we're not a owner or developer of this project. If you do apply, you'll be interacting with us a lot going forward. And then at some point after the lottery, we will pass you off to the leasing office, but that'll be still a little ways in the future at present. So just so you know, obviously we're doing this by way of YouTube live stream. There's also a conference call, and nobody's joined just yet, but if they do, anyone who has questions can ask them at any point, and I'll stop and try and repeat it so that if there's a question coming from the live stream, I can repeat it so the people on the call can hear, and vice versa. I should say also that the purpose of tonight is to give you some background information about this program and this opportunity and what will be required of you to be entered into the lottery, how the lottery will work, and some things to expect going forward after the lottery. There will be, too many things to cover every single aspect of this program or this opportunity. So obviously I won't get to all of them tonight. This is meant as an overview of kind of the biggest and most salient points. But probably the most important thing is that tonight is for your benefit. So if at any time you have questions, please feel free to stop me and I will do my best to answer those. The good news is that this is by no means your only opportunity to ask questions. Our information is in the informational materials in the application, and perhaps you've already been to our website. If you haven't, you can look us up at www.sebhousing.com, where you can find this opportunity and some of the documents, photo, and some other information. And you may find that if and when you do submit an application, you have additional questions that come up that you didn't even realize you had until you started that process. So, don't worry if you don't think of your question tonight, but then you think of it later. You can always reach out to us and we'll be happy to help. And chances are, as you do start going through the application, you start thinking about your specific income and assets, you're going to have more questions as you work through that. And that's totally normal, and that's perfectly fine. I'm going to start by just giving everyone a little bit of information about the actual property. I want to reiterate that I'm not on site, and so I don't have firsthand knowledge. I haven't walked through the hallways and seen these things in person. These are the details that have been provided by the development team. But I would also encourage you, and I'm going to go through those in a sec, but Hanover Mystic does have a very nice website. It looks like it's totally complete. You can see a gallery of photos. You can read about the amenities at the property, and I'm just going to kind of mention a couple of those. It looks like it's near Wellington Station, near Wegmans and the Meadow Glen Mall, and within about 10 or 15 minutes of downtown Boston. There's a resident clubhouse with a smart TV lounge, ping pong, games, shuffleboard. There's a fully equipped catering kitchen. There's an e-lounge. There's a 24-hour fitness center with lots of new and fancy equipment. There's a resort-style pool. It's sort of a courtyard that is encompassed by the building on, I think, 3 or possibly 4 sides. There's a landscape outdoor area with bocce ball, grilling stations, outdoor dining, bike storage. There's a park and pet wash. There's an automated package room, and much more. So So this is a brand new kind of state-of-the-art development with a lot to offer. In terms of the specific units, they have stainless steel appliances, island counters with stone countertops, tile backsplashes, laminate wood floors, painted accent walls, and track lighting. Again, all brand new, so very high-end, very nice apartments through this opportunity. Again, if you want more details, though, take a look at the website. You can poke around and see a lot more, photos and details about what's being offered. Okay, looks like we have our first question here from Lorraine. I am self-employed. How in-depth does my profit and loss for the current year need to be? Do I have to submit a profit and loss statement for 2019 if I had included my 2019 tax returns? Okay, so that's a good question, Lorraine. And I don't know if you have already, but there is a section in the application about the profit and loss for self-employed persons. Okay, so if you go, okay, so we're kind of jumping into the nitty-gritty nuances, and that's totally fine. Getting started here, there are a lot of self-employed people, so I imagine that this will be applicable to a lot of people interested in this opportunity. And the self-employment section of the application, we try and make it clear and kind of lay it out, but inevitably it's a little bit complex and can be a little bit confusing. So the application page that deals with this is pages 23, basically all the way till the end. So you're always going to have to fill out a detailed profit and loss statement, Lorraine and everyone, for the current year. Okay, so to date. So that's actually basically, we're in December, so you've got all of 2020. So you're gonna have to fill that out, and we give you a profit and loss statement form that you can use in the application for the current year. And you're gonna fill out, the revenue source and all the costs of sales and expenses to get your, and then you'll have your total expenses and your net income. It's the net income that we are looking at and deciding upon. It's contrasted with W-2 employees for whom it's the gross income that's relevant. Okay, so that is not going to change. For anyone who's self-employed, you're going to have to do the current year-to-date profit and loss statement, use the form that's in the application. And, the specific documentation that you would have to provide to buttress the claims in there is obviously going to be very particular to you, right? And it'd be impossible for me or anyone else to say exactly what you're going to provide without you kind of starting to go down that road and providing things. And, some of the things that you may provide may raise other questions, but obviously, you can't just fill that out and provide no supporting documentation. So you may have receipts, you may have invoices, you may have contracts, you may have business plans, proposals, you may have a business bank account where, we can draw those connections between here's the, contract that Lorraine had with this person, and we know it lasted this long, and, she's stating she got paid 4 times, and here are 4 deposits in those amounts that altogether add up to the contract amount that we can see in the contract. Great, we can trace that. That all kind of ties together. So that much is going to not change. It doesn't matter what your situation is. You need the year-to-date profit and loss statement. Now, if you don't anticipate changes, then you can check a box on page 23 of the application and say that you do not anticipate any changes going forward, and it's got to be signed, dated, and notarized. You do have to provide 2 years of your taxes. But if you can't provide those, then you would also need to provide a previous year's profit and loss statement, which, similar to the current year, is going to have to be supported by documentation that shows the money coming in and the expenses, and supports the numbers that you put in that statement. So I don't know if that hopefully gives you kind of a picture. I don't know if you've looked at that page of the application yet. I think if you haven't, that's definitely where I would start. I'm just looking through your question to try and make sure I've got everything. Profit and loss statement for 2019, if I have included my 2019 tax returns. So you'll see that in that note, right? So when you go through the application, you'll see that if you provided the previous year's tax returns, you will not have to submit a profit and loss statement for 2019. You've been working on it for a month. Okay, well, I certainly never try and encourage people to, sort of purposefully submit something that's incomplete or half-baked or whatever. On the other hand, if you've been working on it for a month, maybe it's time you submit it and someone at SEB can take a look at it and let you know if something's missing or where the kind of explanations may need further explanations are needed. If it's less thorough, kind of more thorough than we require. But if you've been working on it for a month and it's pretty close, and this actually goes for everyone, okay, right? And I'm going to just kind of take this question and put it in with a larger point that's applicable to everyone, whether you're thinking about self-employment, profit and loss or not, which is that the deadline is January 5th. So we're about 3 weeks away, and the holidays are coming up, and people are going to be busy trying to hopefully be with family or and not filling out their application. But as a general matter, you want to get your stuff in as far ahead of the deadline as you can. And so Lorraine and anyone else, if you have if your application is wildly incomplete, in that case, and it's wildly incomplete, maybe you try and work on it a little longer to finish it before you submit it. But if you think it's close or if you think it's close, I would err on the side of submitting it, letting us look at it and letting us respond to it versus waiting and working and waiting and working and waiting and, trying to make it perfect and then submit it, on January 4th and thinking, great, but it's perfect and now I'm done. And don't do that. Okay. Do not do that. If you think it's close now, just submit it now. And there's a number of reasons for that, but probably the biggest one is that the vast majority of people who submit applications to us do not submit a 100% complete application on the first try. And there are a number of reasons for that. There's just a lot there. There's a lot of documentation that's required. So sometimes things get missed and, people just don't even quite realize it. You could have multiple people in the family, and now you're trying to track down, pay stubs and W-2s and tax returns. For a lot of people, it's easy to miss something. So most people don't get a 100% complete application submitted on the first try. But in addition to that, even if you get absolutely everything into us that's requested by our application, it is very possible and often happens that something that you submit actually raises further questions and prompts us to have to ask for further information. Okay. And so I'll just give you a sort of a classic case is you give us your 3 months of bank statements as requested. You say, great, I've given you my 3 months of bank statements. I can check that box, submitted, done. Well, we look at the bank statements, and in addition to the deposits that we see that are clearly tied to your job, we see other deposits that are not tied to your job or are not tied to any other identifiable source of income. And then we have to say, well, hey, you got $200 on this date, $300 on that date, $250 on that date, $150 on that date. What's that? Did you forget to tell us about a job? Do you have a family or loved one who provides you, periodic payments a couple times a month to help out, which is great, but might count as income? And so point is, it's just, it's very hard to get a 100% complete application on the first try. So it's absolutely to your benefit, especially with the holidays and everything. Get it in on the earlier side. Let us take a look at it. The good thing is this is not a one bite at the apple type of situation. It's not like you submit it once and if it's not complete, well, then too bad for you. Not at all. Okay, not at all. So if you submit an application and there's anything missing or that needs explanation, we'll let you know. You can take it, work on it, resubmit it. You may have to go back and forth with us 2 or 3 or 4 times. That's okay. That's actually common. Get it in early. And on that note, we don't try and make this more difficult than it needs to be. We merely uphold what the program requires, and the program requires a thorough exploration of applicants' income and assets to ensure that only qualified people are being given the opportunity to move forward. And so in order to do that accurately and with some level of confidence, we need to see a lot of documents, not dissimilar from the amount of documentation someone would have to submit to a bank to get a mortgage commitment. So there's a lot. I'm going to move off this topic, but get your application in early. Okay. And it sounds like, okay, yep, we got a question from a caller. Yep, go ask your question and I'll repeat it because I don't think the people who are watching on YouTube will necessarily hear it as you ask it.
Okay, when you're saying that you'll ask us for additional information as a follow-up to something we didn't provide, at what point do we have to get that back to you in order to be part of the lottery?
Okay, so the question for people online who may not have heard it is if an application is submitted, SEB says, thanks, here's some additional information that we need from you. The applicant goes back to try and get that documentation. How much time do they have? And so for everyone, the answer is the deadline is January 5th, okay? That deadline will almost inevitably be extended a little bit to try and help get as many households into the lottery as possible. Any extension will be done in a way that's kind of equitable to everyone. And as we are working with households, we will let you know what that final deadline is. I can't say exactly what it will be right this moment, but it'll probably be within a week of January 5th. Does that answer it?
So we wouldn't be, if we got it in on the 4th and then you found something, we're not knocked out of the lottery.
So the question is, if you submit it on the 4th and then we look at it and it's incomplete, are they knocked out? And the answer is no. You can't walk in and submit it to us on the 6th. If we get it on the 4th, we're going to turn it around really quickly. And we're probably going to give you a pretty quick turnaround date to say, hey, the deadline's the 5th. Here's what we need from you to finish up this process. Okay? Does that make sense?
I also have, yes, it does.
Okay.
I also have another question, and it was regarding prior employment documentation and also unemployment. And so when you have a prior employer and the business went out of business, what documentation do you need if I can't get something that says when my official last date was?
Okay, so the question from the caller is about
with that.
The question from the caller is about if a prior employer has gone out of business and she cannot get a letter from the employer to that effect. Is that correct? And what could then be provided in place of a letter from the employer? So there's a couple things. So if your last day of employment was prior to November and you have a W-2, well, I guess we're not into 2021 yet, so I don't.
In March.
It was in March. Okay.
And I went on unemployment after that.
Okay.
Unemployment would show that I was unemployed.
Okay, so you should, there's been some changes on this, and I'd have to ask one of our application processors what we're doing currently to accommodate this situation where employers have gone out of business and you cannot possibly get a statement. I would include a signed statement from yourself saying when your last date of employment was, the fact that the employer is no longer available to give you a statement, and then we can let you know if anything else is going to be required of you. I'm just not sure exactly how we're treating that right today. I do know that we will make accommodations because you are certainly not the only person in that position.
And just to follow up on that, my records are available on this website called Work Number. Are you familiar with that?
I am
I
not.
think it's connected with Equifax. And there's when I originally worked there, if I wanted in like employment verification, I would have to go into that account and then give somebody a code where they could access my information. And I can do that through that.
Okay.
If I submitted the application and put the information on how to access my work records through this website.
I haven't heard of someone doing that. You can put that in there, but again, I would go back to what I said originally, which is indicate the scenario, and we will let you know what, if anything, and we'll make an accommodation if you cannot get a letter from the employer.
Okay.
Okay. So hold, I'm sorry. I'm gonna just stop. I apologize. I'm gonna stop you right there. Only because we're 21 minutes into this and I haven't even started kind of the big, general overview here. So what I'm going to ask you, just if you don't mind, is let me get started because there are other people watching. And then after, I am happy to stick around and I'll take any personal questions that people may have. Okay, so let's get started on the kind of general overview, and then if people have specific questions about their own applications after, I'm happy to stick around for as long as that takes. Okay, so let me just kind of launch in here. Hanover Mystic River has 350 units in total. 35 of them are going to be made available through this process. That's a big number. There has been a lot of interest so far. But to find 35 households who are all program eligible, who are all lease eligible, who don't have other life circumstances come up that makes them kind of change their mind, it will take a healthy number of applicants to fill all 35 of these units. And so my point in saying that is that even though there is a lot of interest, if you submit a complete application and you're eligible, then I would say that there is a good chance, I'm not guaranteeing anything, but there is a good chance that you would get an opportunity to move forward in this process, okay? So if after watching this, looking at the website, reading through the informational materials, if you think this is an interesting opportunity that you want to apply for, go for it. There's a good chance that if you're eligible, you could be offered an opportunity. The affordable units are all interspersed throughout the development. They're all pre-approved by the state and the city. Okay, so as part of the approval process for this, the developer has to submit floor plans. They have to color in, the units that are going to be designated for this program. And both the city and the state look at it to make sure it's fair and equitable, to make sure that, all the affordable units are all not, stacked in one corner or all in the kind of least desirable locations or otherwise identifiable from the exterior. These have been approved as generally representative of the overall unit mix within the development. There are 3 studio units. The rents are $1,450 a month. There's going to be 19 one-bedroom units that rent for $1,648 a month. 12 two-bedroom units that rent for $1,831 a month, and 1 three-bedroom unit that will rent for $2,013 a month. I want to make two points about the rents. The tenants will, so that's not the final number because that doesn't include utilities. So tenants will be responsible for heat, gas heat, electric cooking, gas hot water, and electricity. But water and sewer are included in the rent, as is a free surface parking space. The other thing I want to say about rents, if you're just kind of generally curious about where those come from a formula that's tied to numbers published by HUD every April. So every April, HUD publishes the area median incomes. As soon as they come out, new rents are calculated based on the area median incomes. What that means is that those rents are those rents, and they don't change. It doesn't matter if you're right up at the limit of the area median income, which we'll talk about soon, or substantially below it, or if you have a voucher, or anywhere in between. If you have no money at all, but you have a voucher, or if you're right up at the income limit, the rent is the rent. The other part about that, so it doesn't change based on your particular circumstances. The other thing to know about the rents, though, is that they do change once every year when HUD publishes the new area median incomes. And if you're a tenant here, they're not going to change now, but if down the road in a year or so from now, or a year plus, if you're a tenant, they could change, and you would be given advance notice before they do change. Rents typically go up a little bit. They can go down. They can stay the same. I can't tell you exactly how much they could go in any direction because it really depends on the numbers that are published by HUD. I would say that on an average year, maybe they go up to the tune of $50 or $60, something like that. But I don't know, actually. I don't know. It depends on the numbers published by HUD. But the corollary to that is that as an affordable tenant, your income can also go up substantially. So just as the rent can go up a little bit, your income can actually go up to the tune of 1.4 times what you can make to be eligible initially. So if you were to apply, you're at one income level, you end up getting a unit, and then 6 months into your lease, maybe you get a nice raise. That's great. As long as it's not a humongous raise, it's probably not going to put you over the income limit that's required when you have to renew. Okay. So let's talk generally about the eligibility requirements. I've already touched on one, and that's probably the biggest one, which is that these are affordable units. They're income restricted units. The rents are substantially low what they would be on the market rate. Stands to reason that you have to qualify within the income parameters that are set for this program. You have to be under a certain income limit. Now, the maximum incomes are kind of littered throughout our materials. They're in our ad, they're in our info pack, they're in our application, they're on our website. You don't have to memorize these, but the income limits go by household size. Okay, so it doesn't matter. People will sometimes say, "What's the income limit for someone applying for a 1-bedroom unit or a 2-bedroom unit?" That's not quite the right way to phrase the question, because it's not based on the size of the unit that you're applying for. It's based on the number of people in your household. So, for example, a household size of 1 can make up to $67,400 in a year and be eligible. If you make above that, unfortunately, you're not eligible for this opportunity. A household size of 2 can make up to $77,000. Now, maybe there's a household size of 1 that's applying for a studio unit and a household size of 2 applying for a studio unit. Well, if they're both eligible, that rent doesn't change, okay? So the more, the bigger your household size is for kind of a smaller unit, if you're up at that income limit, there's a sort of a bigger window of affordability is one way to think about it. You can make more people in your household, but the rents stay the same. Okay, and so household size of 3 can make $86,650. Household size of 4 can make up to $96,250. Household size of 5 can make up to $103,950. And a household size of 6 can make up to $111,650. Now, all sources of income are counted. All sources of income are counted, and the sources of income are broad. I would encourage you, when you fill out the application, we have an income table that we've put together for households. where we try to list sort of myriad sources of income that people may have. And we list the kind of more common ones that people tend to think about as income and some of the maybe less common ones. Please take your time and go through that so that you prompt yourself to make sure to include all of the documentation for the sources of income that you have. Now, the sort of most obvious one is, what do you make in your job from your employer? What's your, whether it's hourly or if you're salaried, that's what we sort of typically think of. Sure, if that's income, you'll have to include information about that. If you get pay stubs, that would be something you'd have to provide. Or we already talked about self-employment, and you'd have to fill out the self-employment affidavit at the back of our application. But you may have other sources of income too, and those can be, varied. You could be getting Social Security income. You could be getting Social Security disability income. You could have a pension. You could be getting retirement distributions. You could be getting unemployment. You could be getting periodic gifts from a friend or family member. That actually comes up with some frequency. Not something that we think of as income, but if someone is paying you regularly, okay, you have a friend or loved one who is helping you out, that's terrific. That's great. But if it's regular and it's consistent and there's a pattern of it, those count as income. You could have an asset that generates income, okay? And your typical, bank account doesn't generate much of anything, but maybe you have another asset that's more fruitful in the income that it generates. That counts towards your income limit. So full-time income does not include children under the age of 18. So if you have a child who's going to be moving into the unit with you, who's 15 and has a job, we're not interested in how much they make in their job. The other one that doesn't count is for full-time students who are dependents. Anything over $480, we don't count. It's kind of a random number, but that's the number. So if you have a kid who's going to be moving into the unit with you and they have a job and they make $3,000 a year, well, we're only counting 480 as against the income limit. Anything above that, we're not counting it. Now, there's no minimum income requirement in this affordable housing program, but households do need to be able to show that they can afford the rent on their own. So the property has a sort of a minimum income threshold that's applicable to any renter at this development, whether they're applying for a unit in this program or for a unit that is not restricted. And that limit is the property requires a household to make 2.5 times the monthly rent. Now, unlike the income limits, which we talked about, which are tied to the number of people applying, right? We said if you're a one-person household, you can make $67,400, and if you're a two-person household, you can make $77,000. And it doesn't matter if you're applying for a studio or a one-bedroom or a two-bedroom; those numbers don't change. But on the other hand, when you're looking at the minimum income threshold to demonstrate that you can afford the rent, well, then that is bedroom size dependent, right? Because there are different rents for different bedroom sizes. So, and again, these are in the information packet, so you don't need to, memorize these. But for a studio unit, a household would have to make about $43,500. For a one-bedroom unit, they'd have to make about $49,440. Two-bedroom unit, $54,930, and for a three-bedroom, $60,390. Now, I should say very clearly, if you have a voucher, disregard everything I've said. The minimum income analysis does not apply to you. Okay, if you have a voucher, the minimum income analysis does not apply to you. But if you don't have a voucher, then you need to be able to demonstrate to the leasing office that you're going to be able to afford the rent on your own when the time comes. There's no guarantors, okay? If you're on the cusp, you can't say, yeah, but my parent will be a guarantor to make sure that the property's comfortable. This program doesn't allow that. I do want to say that the analysis that SEB Housing will do when we are deciding whether you are eligible for the lottery is much less rigorous on the minimum income than it is on the maximum income. And that's because, again, the maximum income limits are a program requirement. So we have to be very careful that when we say, yep, applicant Jane Doe is eligible for this program, we need to be careful to make sure that they are under those income limits. On the other side, we do not want to be forwarding on applicants who will never be able to meet the leasing office's requirements. That's not of any service to the applicant or the leasing office or anyone else, if it's very clear that they're never going to be able to afford the rent. But if it's close, okay, I guess my point is, if it's close, you know, you're within $1,000, $1,500, we'll say, hey, that's close enough for us. SEB, we're not going to be the ones to tell you that you can't, meet their lease screening criteria. That doesn't mean that it couldn't be an issue later after the lottery if you are invited to move forward. So just keep that in mind. And I do want to say one more thing about this, which is that we can also look at your assets, right? So just using the studio as an example again, I said that in order to meet the leasing office's screening criteria for a studio, you have to demonstrate that you make $43,500. But if you make a little bit less than that, but you have some assets, you have a bank account and you have money in there, then that can be considered towards those thresholds. Okay, now, in addition, so we're still talking about eligibility requirements for this program. We've touched on income. We've talked about the fact that there are income limits, that they're specific to the number of people that you're applying with. You can find those in the materials. For any W-2 employees, it's your gross income. If you're a W-2 employee, it's your gross income. If you're self-employed, it's your net income that we're counting. And it's all people that are in the household, with the exception of the full-time students who are dependents, anything over 480, and minors. Okay, so that's kind of broad overview of what we've just talked about. Now, in that same vein, there is an asset analysis. So when you fill out your application, you're going to see that there's a whole big table that asks you to list what your different assets are. Okay, and again, you'll see, just like income, there are various sources of assets. Probably the two common ones that you think of are probably your checking and savings account, and certainly you need to include those. You need to include statements from the 3 most recent months, but there are other ones too. Okay, you could have a trust account, you could have 401k, you could have mutual fund stocks, etc. So there are various sources of assets. Now, unlike income, there's no asset cap. So you could have $100,000 in assets, you could have $500,000 in assets, you could have $1 million in assets. It's not going to put you over some asset limit, but your assets, many assets, generate income, and that income does count. Okay, so if you have $1 million, and I mean, probably no one does, but just for purposes of illustration, if someone were to have $1 million in the bank and that generated income, as it would, right? That income would be counted as against the income limits that we've already talked about. So that's probably one of the ways in which assets are most relevant, is the income that they generate. We're not interested in personal assets, so baseball card collection or a car or jewelry or what have you. That we're not asking about those. We don't look at that. The biggest asset that people, obviously, usually for many people, most people, is a home. You may own property. You are allowed to own property at the time you apply. You are not allowed to own property at the time that you would go to sign a lease. So you would have had to, if you own property, you will have to be off the deed. Okay, and it doesn't just have to be, it's not only applicable to property that you own solely. If you own property in any fashion, if you're on there, if it's owned with someone else, if you own it in trust, you cannot be on the deed to the property at the time you were that you may go sign a lease in this program. So you will have had to have sold it. But the money that you get from the sale, again, that's treated as an asset. It's not treated as income. So if you have $100,000 in equity on a property and you're thinking, hey, if I sell it, I'm going to get, I'm going to stand to gain $100,000. That's going to put me over the income limit. No, that's treated as an asset. And again, there's no asset limit. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about household size and composition. This isn't really so much an eligibility requirement. We sort of list it there. It is an important requirement, though, in terms of how the lottery is conducted and how priority will be given. As you've noted, there are multiple units at different bedroom sizes in this opportunity. So you've got studios, 1, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms. The program requires that we give priority to households who the program deems need all of the bedrooms. And so when you fill out your application, one of the first pages is going to ask you what household type you are. You can only be one of 3 types. There are only 3 types. You can be a household type 3, a household type 2, or a household type 1. Those household types correspond to the number of bedrooms that the program says you need. So a household type 3 is a household who the program says would need 3 bedrooms. And type 2 is the program would say need 2 bedrooms. And type 1 program would say needs only 1 bedroom or studio. Okay. This will be important when we talk about the lottery and how the waiting lists are generated, because the program requires that for the larger bedroom sizes, the larger household types be given priority over smaller household types. The application is pretty self-explanatory. We give examples of the different household makeups that can constitute each type. So just go onto the different types, find your household, the one that's applicable to you, check the box, and it's sort of as simple as that. So, you'll see if you're a household with 5 people in it, you're going to be a type 3 household. If you're a household with 1 person in it, you're going to be a type 1 household. And there are various other kind of iterations or ways that a household can be made up, but pretty self-explanatory. Just check the box, and that's the household type that you are. I should also say, and hopefully this is clear from the application, but I always like to repeat it, that you can apply for more than 1 bedroom size. So you can apply for all of them, okay? And frankly, there is a benefit in being over-inclusive in applying for more bedroom types than in being under-inclusive. So if you think you could conceivably be happy in a studio, a 1 bedroom, or a 2 bedroom, check all 3. Okay, check all 3. You don't have to just pick the one that you kind of like the most. And the reason for that is because you could be eligible for all 3, and when we do the lottery, you could have waiting list positions for all 3, and maybe you'll get some choice over the matter. Or maybe you'll be eligible for 2 of them and not the other, and we'll let you know. And then you say, okay, great. Well, I tried and now I know, but hey, I'm eligible for 2 of them, so I'll move forward on those 2. Conversely, if you only apply for, say, a 2 bedroom, and then we run the lottery, and you say, geez, I made a mistake. I wish I had applied for a 3 bedroom. Can this be fixed somehow? It's going to be too late at that point. I mean, you could still sort of apply as a post-lottery household, and you lose some of your priority that comes along with being in the lottery. So you want to be over-inclusive, because again, there's absolutely no downside to checking off more bedrooms. And if you decide later that you're not interested in one, that's fine. But that's a much better position to be in than to say, yikes, I wish I had applied for a 3 bedroom and I didn't realize it at the time. And, how can I fix that now? Okay. Kalina, if you qualify for disability, do you get priority no matter of household type? Okay, well, so we are going to talk about the waiting list in a bit. There are 2 units out of the 35 that are fully ADA, disabled accessible. One of them is a 2-bedroom unit, and one of them is the 3-bedroom unit. Households who need the features of those units will get priority as compared to households who do not. But within households who have a disability and need the features of those units, larger households will get priority over the smaller households. So for example, for the 3-bedroom unit that is disabled accessible, the top priority will be given to type 3 households who need the features of the unit. And they will be followed by type 2 households who need the features of the unit. Okay? And we'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about the waiting list. But yes, if you have a disability, you would get priority as compared to households who don't have one. Now, for the 2-bedroom units, there are 12 of those. So there'll be a separate waiting list for the 2-bedroom disabled accessible unit. And then there will be all the other 2-bedroom units that won't have that priority attached because, right, those units don't have those features. But for one of those units, there will be a separate waiting list. For one of the 2-bedroom units, there will be a separate waiting list where someone who has need of the features of the unit will get priority. Okay, and again, larger households will be given priority for the 2-bedroom units as well. Okay, now when you submit a lottery application, we've already talked some about how, if something's incomplete, we'll let you know, and there may be some back and forth. We'll give you a very specific checklist of anything that may be missing for you to work on. And then, but if you're ineligible, okay, we'll let you know that as well. And then if you're eligible, great, we'll send you a letter, and the letter will have, a decent amount of information on it, and you want to look at that closely. So the letter will have a lottery application number, and that number will be in the form of A.001 and then everything after that. And that application number simply corresponds to the order in which you submitted a totally complete lottery application. It doesn't have any bearing on, the waiting list or how you're going to get to move forward. A.001 is not the number 1 household. They were just the first household to submit a complete lottery application. And the number is an anonymous identifier to be used in the lottery to keep your name and information private from other households who are applying. So get that number. I also can't stress enough, read the letter that we send you. Make sure that what we put in there is consistent with what, the details that you put in your application and your expectations. I mean, obviously, if we've made a mistake, we'll do right by you to fix it. But if you made a mistake and we're merely repeating it back to you, and you don't catch it then, well, then later on in the process, after the lottery, it could be too late at that point to fix it, right? So if you say, I'm applying for a 2-bedroom and you meant to write 3-bedroom, but you wrote 2-bedroom and we responded and said, hey, you're eligible for a 2-bedroom, and you don't correct us. And then after the lottery, you say, oh, wait a sec, I thought I was applying for a 3-bedroom. It could be, a little late at that point to fix it. Okay, so just look at the letter, read it closely. If there's anything that's off, just let us know and we can fix it at that point. But better to do it then than, on the night of the lottery or after the lottery. Okay, let's talk a little bit about, actually just give me one sec here. The final thing I wanted to say actually before we talk about the lottery is, you can't have a financial interest in this development and still be eligible for this opportunity. Doesn't come up often, comes up time to time. If you are, related to the ownership group or someone who works on the management team, that is not allowed, and then you would have to disclose that in your lottery application. As I say that, I think it's probably hard maybe for everyone to even know if that's applicable to them. The developer is Mill Creek. I couldn't begin to tell you everyone that works for Mill Creek. That's a big organization, but I guess if you know that you're related to someone who's, associated with this development, you should probably raise that and figure out if you could qualify as a related party. Related parties are not allowed, and the reason for that is because if the brother of the developer or the sister of someone who works on the management team is living in a unit, then that may make other people feel like that could have been unfair, or there was sort of insider dealing, that type of thing. So the program does not allow related parties. Okay, let me go back to where I was a second ago, which is the lottery. So if you submit a complete lottery application, you're eligible. You'll get your letter with your lottery application number and other important information. And for everyone who's reading this, I know you're going to look at that closely to make sure it's all accurate, and hopefully it will be. And then we will do, on the night of the lottery drawing, which will be January 20th, it'll be at 6 p.m. It'll be the same format as we do right here. So it'll be on YouTube live stream, and then for households who want to call in, we can do that. That'll be available as well. There'll be two lottery drawings. There will be a lottery drawing for households who qualify for local preference, and then a separate drawing for households who don't. Local preference means households who live in Medford, who work in Medford, who work for the city of Medford, or who have children attending the Medford schools. What local preference means is that the city has requested and the state has approved that for 70% of the units, there be a preference for households who meet those criteria as compared to households who don't. I just want to be very clear. It's not for every single unit in the development. It's only for 70%. And the other thing, so that in this case is 24 units. So there will be 19 one-bedroom units and 5 two-bedroom units, where if you qualify for local preference, you will have priority as compared to similar type households who don't have local preference. Now, local preference doesn't trump household type for larger units. This can get a little bit tricky kind of fast. We do have examples of how the waiting list will be created in the information packet. It's on page 12 under the waiting list. It's probably the easiest way to kind of digest this, but you don't have to. Quite honestly, you don't have to spend any time on this if you don't want to. This is merely for your edification, for how this, how the kind of sausage gets made when we send out the waiting list after the lottery. But for 24 of the units, there will be a local preference. Now, for one-bedroom units, there's no household type preference. So for a one-bedroom unit, if you're a household type 1, household type 2, household type 3, it makes no difference. You will have priority in the order you're drawn relative to other households. Your household type doesn't matter. But if you're a local preference household for those 19 one-bedroom units, you will get priority over non-local preference households. For the two-bedroom units, just as an example, the type 2 and 3 local preference households will get priority over type 2 and 3 non-local preference households, but they will get priority over type 1 households who have local preference, who have priority over type 1 households who do not have local preference. I want to stop myself before I kind of get too into the weeds on this, because it's honestly probably just best, if you're interested in how the waiting lists get made, look at page 12 of the information packet. You can have some time to kind of sit and digest it. Again, you do not need to know this. It just is there to kind of help you understand for if you're in the lottery and then you get the waiting list and you're wondering, oh, I just kind of wonder how this came out this way. Okay, now what flows from that is that when we do the lottery, and again, you don't have to attend the lottery. You can attend if you want, that's great. Certainly encourage households if they want to. If you don't want to, you absolutely don't have to. And there's no benefit to sort of attending in terms of any priority. You're all going to get the results at the same time. Now, you might be thinking, well, wait a sec, if I watch the lottery, aren't I going to know before the person who doesn't watch the lottery? And the answer is no, you're not necessarily going to know. And the reason you're not going to know is because when we do the lottery drawings, you're going to have no idea if the other numbers that are picked around you're not going to know what household type they are. You're not going to know if they qualified for local preference. You're not going to know if they have a disability. You're not even going to know what bedroom size they apply for. Okay, so there's all these factors, and you're not going to know any of them, right? Now, as a general matter, is it better to be picked earlier rather than later? Yes, it is, as a general matter, better to be picked earlier rather than later. But if you're picked number one, does that mean you're number one? Not necessarily, and oftentimes probably not. If you're a type 2 household applying for a 3-bedroom unit, every type 3 household is going to leapfrog you. If you're a type 1 household applying for a 2-bedroom unit, you're going to be leapfrogged by every type 2 and 3 household. Okay, so point is, you don't know as I'm doing the drawing, so it's actually a little bit anticlimactic in that way. Now, the good news is that I will sort the lottery results within a matter of just like a few hours of doing the drawing. If you have email, I'll send you the waiting list that night. The waiting list will be ordered top to bottom in the order of priority. So, just that night of the lottery, you can check your email within a couple hours. You'll get the waiting list. There'll be several different waiting lists. And you'll just have to find your lottery application number on there, and then that will let you know, okay, all right, I'm number 5 on the 2-bedroom list, and I'm number 8 on the 1-bedroom list, and I see that there are this many units of that type. So, oh, great, that means I'm definitely going to be invited to move forward in the next step. Or conversely, maybe I'm not in that top tier, so I might have to wait, or I may not get invited, but I may, and I'm just going to have to kind of wait and see. Hold on, let me pause here. So, Kalina, what is the significance of identifying as a family of color on the lottery application? So, the program requires that the local preference pool cannot have a percentage of minorities that is less than the percentage of minorities in the surrounding area. And so, if that is the case, let's say that there are 10 households that, and I think so, the surrounding area has 27% of the surrounding area. I apologize. 27% of the people who live in the surrounding area identify as minority. Those are the statistics applicable to this area. That means that at least 27% of the people in the local preference pool should be minority, right? So if you have 10 people that indicate that they're local preference and only one of them indicates they're minority, but there are other minority households who applied and are eligible for the lottery but who aren't local preference, then we may need to add some of them so that the representation of minority households in the local preference pool is equal to or greater than the representation of minorities in the surrounding area. That's the relevance of that. I want to go back for a sec. I jumped a little bit into the weeds of how waiting lists are made, and then I kind of tried to jump out. And what I should have probably started with, and what I want to say now is, people often think of lotteries and they think of winners and losers, and people often ask, like, I won the lottery or I lost the lottery, or, winners get picked, and that's really just not quite the right verbiage for these lotteries. These lotteries are a little bit different than other lotteries, because it's not as though we just pick, a couple winners and then everyone else goes home. Okay, that's not how it works. Rather, when we do the lottery drawing, we pick every household that's eligible, and every single household will have a position on a waiting list. And the waiting list determine the order of priority moving on to the next step in the process, which is to apply for a lease. So every household in the lottery will have a position on a waiting list. And you could have, if you apply for multiple units, you'll likely have different positions on different waiting lists. You could be really high on one list and kind of low on another, or you could be low on all of them, you could be high on all of them, you could be in the middle, or any one of those combinations, right? But every household will be on the waiting list for the unit types that they are eligible for, I should say, okay? So if you're eligible only for 2-bedroom units, then you'll only be on the 2-bedroom waiting list. Those will be totally separate from the 1-bedroom, studio, and 3-bedroom waiting lists. If you're eligible for the studios 1s and 2s, then you'll be on multiple waiting lists. Okay, and then I also just want to say that if you're not in one of the very top spots on a waiting list, let's just use the studios as an example, because there are 3 of those only. So there are 3 studio units. So if you're not in the top 3, is it the case that, oops, then that's unfortunate and you aren't going to get to move forward? Well, the answer is not necessarily. Okay, not necessarily at all. So if you're not in the top 3 in the studio, that's not reason to think, oh, that's too bad. I tried, but it didn't work out. It may not, but it very well may. And the reason for that is because, nobody has been approved for a lease at this point in the process. Okay, when you've applied for the lottery, you've been program approved by SEB Housing, but we haven't looked at your credit. We haven't looked at your, if you have a landlord references, if there's a criminal background that would prohibit you from meeting the leasing office criteria. We don't look at those things. We don't ask for those things in the application. So someone could be program eligible and not lease eligible, and that stinks when that happens, but it does happen. So and if it does happen, and if that's a household that has a top 3 spot on the studio waiting list, well, then guess what? There's going to be another studio available to the 4th household on that list. Or maybe a top 3 household is also on the 1-bedrooms and decides, what, they really need a 1-bedroom, they're not interested, or maybe they're only on the studios, but circumstances change, they want to live somewhere else, they don't want to move. These things happen all the time. So I guess the point of this is, if you're not in one of the top, spots on the night of the lottery, don't think that you're definitely not going to get an opportunity. You may just have to be a little bit patient to see what happens with the household ahead of you. Conversely, if you are one of the top spots, households in one of the top spots, don't think, yes, I definitely have a unit, I'm going to tell my landlord right now that I'm moving out. Do not do that, because this process isn't done yet. You've come a long way at this point, but you're not done yet, because you still have to be eligible for a lease. So don't give any notice to your current landlord until you are also lease approved and you've got a unit selected, and maybe at that point, but I wouldn't do it before then. Okay. I think, as I've touched on, the next kind of big step in this process, and up until this point, we've really just been talking about what this program is, who's eligible, a little bit about the lottery and how the waiting lists are made and how everyone's going to be on the waiting list. I'll send you the results the night of the lottery with the waiting list, and there'll be several of them, and they'll be ordered with your lottery application numbers top to bottom. The next step is for households will be invited to apply for a lease. How long exactly that takes will depend somewhat on the leasing office, but they'll probably invite households in batches to move forward and apply for a lease. And when you do that, you'll go through the kind of the standard lease screening criteria, where they'll look at those factors like, probably credit and prior rental history and things of that nature. Now, if you're eligible, you can pick from any of the available units on the wait list that you have been invited from. Okay, you can pick from any of the available units on the waiting list that you have been invited from. So if you are on the studio list and the one-bedroom list, just as an example, you've applied for both, you're eligible for both, you've been invited by the leasing office to move forward from the studio list, and you're the #1 household, well, then you can pick from any of those 3 units. Okay, you get to choose which one you want. But you can't say, hey, I'm actually going to pick this 1-bedroom unit, because you have to wait till you're invited from the 1-bedroom list. And if they haven't invited the 1-bedroom list yet, then you can't do that at that point. You'd have to wait. That's especially the case if you have a low position on the 1-bedroom list. There may be a bunch of households ahead of you who would need to be given opportunity before you are, right? You're #1 on the studio and you're number 30 on the 1-bedroom list. Well, if you get invited forward from the studio, you're going to have a decision to make. Do I rent the studio that I know I can get right now, or do I forego it and hope that my number comes up on the 1-bedroom list? Okay. But in any event, so if you're a top, and I'm just using the studio as an example. This could be any of the waiting lists, but when you get invited forward, you can pick from any of the available units. So if the top household reserves 1 unit, that one comes off the list. The households behind them can choose from the remaining units until all of the units are leased up. I said already that you do have to undergo a yearly eligibility review. It's only once a year. If you're in a unit, that necessarily means you will have already done this, so you have some experience. You already have, if SEB is involved on renewals, helping the property, we'll already have some of your documents on file. We may be able to reuse some of them, but a lot of them are going to have to be updated. But you do have to undergo a screening every year to show that you're still eligible. Like I mentioned towards the beginning, you can make a lot more money on renewal than you can to initially get into a unit. So just by way of example, and this is in the informational materials, there's a whole chart, so you don't have to memorize these, and frankly, these will change in the future. But for a household size of 1 to get into the program to be eligible today, you can make up to $67,400. But if you were a tenant right now, okay, not an applicant, let's just say, this property came online a year ago, the lottery already happened, you got a unit, and now we're coming up on your lease renewal and you have to renew, you could make up to $94,360. So you can make almost $30,000 more on renewal and still be eligible. There's room to grow if you're going to get a raise or something like that. You don't necessarily have to reject it as a tenant. Just make sure it doesn't put you over the renewal limit. All right, so that's an overview. Okay, that's an overview of the program. I hope that has been helpful. I'm going to take questions now if people have them. If you haven't already looked at it, please take a look at our information packet. There's a lot of information in there about this program. Much of what I've covered tonight is in there. The application is also filled with examples, so you can take your time looking through that, and you can always get in touch with us if you have questions, even if you don't think of them right now. If you think of them in the future, reach out. We'll be happy to help you through it. And with that, I'm going to kind of wrap it up. I hope that's sort of a helpful summary of this opportunity and this process. And I'm open for questions. So actually, before, I think, Lorraine, you had a final and 4th question. I'm not sure if I ever got to it. What's the difference between a tax return and a transcript? Well, you need the computerized one. So if you use something, it's not the handwritten one. So you either need it from the IRS, or if you use something like TurboTax or H&R Block, you need to get the transcript from them. So I don't know if you're still there, but that's if you did it by hand or something, and you made a copy before you submitted it, that's not something we can accept. You need to probably, in that case, request the transcript from the IRS. But for many people, or if you have an accountant who helped you, they could get you the computerized printout. Or if you use something like TurboTax or H&R Block or a similar service, you can get it right from the website. Any other questions? Anyone? No? Okay. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Again, I hope it was helpful. And again, our information's in the information packet. It's in the application. So if you have any questions, please reach out. We'd be happy to help you out. Thanks a lot. Have a great night, everyone.